Yawa. Yakayok satiri yohan. Kanayan nekik yata. We had a couple questions about how to find some resources, and one of them was on place names. So if we go to tlingitlanguage.com, I'm thinking of transitioning everything from Tlingit with a K spelled with a T to Tlingit, but this can be a huge, like, do I have to change the name of the website now? And anyways, that's a whole other dilemma. I got enough dilemmas, but under resources and beginning materials, there's a number of things that are on here. And if you really dig around this site, there's lots of stuff here. I think everything should be just available, but not everybody agrees with me. But if you scroll down here to place names, this is a collection of place names that was published by Sealaska Heritage Institute. If you download this as a PDF, it's a searchable document, so you can look up Gold Creek or you can look up Yakutania if you just see something. And not every place name is in here. There's probably about 3,500 place names in this text. Some of them are not known, and we're just gonna have to make new names for places. Some of them have been withheld. If there's a sacred site and you don't want people to go dig stuff up, because they will, then some of those have been withheld. And there are some that might have names that some people get embarrassed by, but in Tlingit, they're just fine. Another sort of source that I was thinking about, so there's a number of dictionaries. I want to talk about a little bit of history of dictionaries among Tlingit. There was this orange dictionary called the Tlingit Noun Dictionary, which when I was learning Tlingit, that was the one that I was using. Then at some point, Jeff Lear published the Interior Tlingit Dictionary. Oh yeah, Xíxchʼ Uwasháayí. And the Orange Dictionary is wonderful. However, this was way before the age of searchable documents, and also it wasn't alphabetical. So if you ran into a Tlingit word, you would just have to sort of flip through the book until you found it. However, it's organized by category. So if you say, I want to know the name of this kind of animal, you can sort of jump to the animals and go look for it. I think it's alphabetical by English and then over to Tlingit. So then Jeff Lear came out with what is still the most comprehensive noun dictionary that's ever been made in Tlingit. Tons and tons of stuff in there. Then Carrie Eggleston made a dictionary, and then I'm working on a dictionary right now, and I'm sure other people are as well. So a lot of times I would probably go to the one I've been working on just so I can copy and paste the text. Because one of the problems if you copy and paste from the Edwards dictionary, you get like an N with a tilde on it, and you get like the character's a little strange, because the idea was like a font was made, but if you're not using that font, the characters look they just look different. One was a Y with a something over. I know I could spot them when I see them. And so then the Lear dictionary, you can't really copy from that at all, because you could scan it, but then my experience is scanners don't recognize the characters that we use, and it's also a different orthography than the one that we're using here in our classes. So I would go to the one that I've been working on, but it doesn't have categories. So these other ones have categories. So you could look up birds and you could look up plants. But if you're trying to find some kind of noun and you can't find it, then I would recommend going into the Interior Tlingit Dictionary, which is down here. And download all of these things too. Like, you should just have them in your collection. So if we go to the Interior Tlingit Dictionary, which is an amazing resource, we have, I was looking up eelgrass. We're looking up all these different kind of grasses. Grasses and mosses have been on our mind. But so what you have is on the left side, you can see the table of contents. So this document has been scanned, and someone took the time to build a table of contents within it as well. So a document has a table of contents, and nowadays when you export it from a lot of programs, you can just have it just linked right into the PDF. But if we go down here to plants, then we can start going through trees, berry plants, grass-like plants. So they are organized kind of by what type of plant they are. And sometimes that's very useful, but if you're not sure, you're like, well, I know this thing, it's called yarrow, but I don't know what type of plant that's considered. Is it grass-like? Is it? So you could look through all of these, or you could go to the English section and go down to the Y, and then you can scroll up and you get yarrow, which is kakak, which is a field mouse tail. And so that's one way you could do it. But then also going up here, so this one is really useful, although you got to be able to sort of see this underline G, this GH we would write as an underline G. This barred L, we wouldn't use a barred L. This I with a downward tone mark would be EE, then D, and then high tone I. So sometimes using this resource, you kind of got to go back and forth. However, I don't know if I'll be able to find, I've got a noun, a collection of nouns somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. Hold on a second. I might not be able to find it. Stop the share.
Crochet sent me a massive list of living things, which is about 6 pages of everything.
Oh, really?
Which I can share with you.
Yay, gonna teach.
So what was the, or what is the Kayani Commission? Isn't that what it's called?
Yeah, so they're, I'm not sure if they are active, but there was certainly a Kayani Commission that was in existence in Sitka. And their mission, as far as I remember, was education. So educating people about plants. There's lots of medicinal plants, edible plants, poisonous plants, but then also plant protection. Because what I remember with the Kayani Commission, when I first encountered them, there were a lot of discussions about commercialization of harvesting Xíxchʼ and Xíxchʼ, and we wanted to make sure that resources were being protected as well. So that's what
So it was more about the resources, not about collecting the words.
Yeah, but they did, I think they did a lot of work. So if you go walking through Totem Park and you see a bunch of signs with plant names on them, like I think they did a lot of that work.
Yeah, you're right. Those signs do have the English and the Lingít on them.
Okay, I'm gonna have to I had this big list of nouns, which I have them somewhere, but let me show you what it's gonna look like when you see it. Because sometimes some sources are very useful, but not user-friendly. And I would sort of put this into that category. So what this one is going to look like is going to look like this. So you might have actually 3 or 4 entries of the exact same thing. Because this is from a database that's helping to organize stuff for publishing a dictionary. So what this is saying is you have a word like we'll use au. So that is listed under calf or leg. So this category right here says when you look it up in English, it's going to be under these things. and then this will have a definition under it. So, and then Xíxchʼ is up there in case you need to know how to say diarrhea. There you go. Um, and if you're raising kids and your goal is to not speak English with the kids, and sometimes you got to sort of figure out these things. So this is a true story. So I like cheese and I like ice cream, but I really can't do milk. Like even like if there's a cheese threshold and an ice cream threshold that I've learned to manage, and every now and then I will cross, but like a glass of milk would just destroy me, right? And so it comes back to sort of this thing like you're not a cow, so you can't have milk. But when my daughter was pretty little, she was saying, I want strawberry milk, I want chocolate milk, I want this kind of milk. And I said, I don't want you to drink milk. And she said, why? I said, so the way you use this word is you could say ikat kukwagut or ikade kukwagut, which literally means it's going to walk on top of you. But that's how you say like something's going to come, right? Usually something bad. So tz'ech ikat kukwagut. And she said, what's tz'ech? So she could understand Lingít, but she would isolate these words that she didn't know. It was really interesting to teach someone Lingít only using Lingít, which I should probably be doing more here. But I said, hinyacheti hot, because she knew hot. And so hot is another word for poop, and then hinyacheti would be, it's like water. So now you know how to explain. Sorry, get a little distracted. However, this is, if you're looking for a particular plant, like you could do a search for this. If we search, I don't know if you guys can see that. I could say hellebore. Oh, I spelled it right. So then you get Xíxchʼ. So this is a searchable thing. It also will give you the scientific name. It'll give you information about it if there is information. And this one doesn't have any. So as I was making a new dictionary, if there's going to be Xíxchʼ, it needs to say, this will kill you if you eat it. But it should also say, there is a medicine that people make out of the root. Don't mess around with that if you don't know what it is, though, because and also if you just took the stalks, don't eat them, and be very careful. But if you drilled holes in them and you look through them, you won't turn to stone. If you saw like Raven or Medusa, like say Medusa came to town and be like, go get some Xíxchʼ. We gotta like, it's just I don't know, it's a thing. We just know that kind of stuff. Any questions about that? So basically, I've spent the last 10 years trying to pull from a whole bunch of different resources to filter them into one dictionary, which, we'll see. If you folks, oh yeah, you could say, yeah, sometimes you get some word, so you could say ts'ek is smoke, but that is also the Tlingit slang term for cigarettes. So if that's something you do, you gotta be careful that you're saying ts'ek ach tuwasaku and not ts'ek ach tuwasaku, because then people are like, wow, well, good luck with that, I guess, Let's see. I guess on to more useful things. But like just trying to think of like how to get all of this information into one place. Lots of people doing lots of amazing stuff. And then there's so many words for things in here. So the word for bat is in here. The word for glacier bear is in here. And some of these things, like as we continue to use the language, we're going to find stuff that we don't have words for. So just, we were sort of finalizing a word for today, the ones I was working with. I work with a friend of mine. I call him Xíxchʼ Uwasháayí, who lives in Tlein. I send him all kinds of questions, and he works with Anya Shahash Sam Johnston. And so one of the things is like how you say sentence. I can't just keep saying sentences away. How many sentences did you win? Did you obtain? Did you do? So, there you go. It makes a lot of sense. Let me put this into something y'all can see. So coming back, let's see, what am I going to put this in? By a slideshow. So don't worry about that other stuff. Wooch itch you tunk. So this is a sentence. And then the other one we had was do in anaka, which was use sign language with them. So what do you guys think, wooch it yuchatunk? How do you think that works? What do you?
Something together.
Yeah, well, together. So like wooch is together. And then what about the it part? Anybody got any ideas on that?
Is that repetitive?
Yeah, so this is two parts, and we are going to start talking about this stuff probably after you folks do your sentences. I'll wait to introduce like the next big thing. The next big thing that we're going to talk about. So today we'll get back into our frog story, finish walking through that. We'll kind of review a few things with the possessive marker. We'll also look at some of the little readings in Lingít. Thursday we've got some class visitors. Next week we start reading. We won't be recording because folks will be reading the letters that they're writing for their midterms. So for a safety thing, we're just gonna just share that with the class, just live. After that, we're going to start taking a look at direction and locational terms, and we're going to look at how those things work. I'll share with you folks next week. There's a chapter at Hausanech Hayuchatungi, which sort of describes how they work and has these huge tables of quite a few of them. And I tried to organize them into what I think are the most common ones and then sort of more uncommon ones so that you can sort of get some that you're trying to commit to memory first. And we're going to do a bunch of activities to try and sort of figure out how these work. Because some of them, we'll talk about how they work, and we'll talk about these lists and how to start interpreting them. And this is how they work. So you have wooch, which is together or to each other. It is to follow something. This underline X is repeatedly or coming back to something. So, or moving around. So wooch it is following each other or right behind each other. Wooch it yuchatunk would be language that's right behind one another, basically. Wooch it would work pretty well for like getting people to stand in a line or do something like that. And then du'in kanaka is use sign language with that person. I don't know of a list of onomatopoeia. I know of a list of things that sound very similar. So we call them like nominal pairs. It's like just one sound apart from one another. So if you had like iq and iq, those are two different words. And so just trying to practice some of those to make sure we're not getting, there's quite a few of them I get confused. Like which one is the high tone, which one is the low tone? So, but yeah, onomatopoeia would be good. Would be a good thing to put together.
Wasa, dasa, do some word.
Yuchatunk.
Yuchatunk.
And just, yeah, so when we say wasa duasak, we're saying, what is this thing called? So this works really well for a noun, because you're really asking, like, what is this thing called? What's a table called? What's this, you know? Yuchatunk is language, speech, or a word. So we'd say, we were messing around, we'd say, Yuchatunk itlaji de, word to your mother. Because, a lot of us, we grew up with listening to hip hop, and so we translate sometimes whole lyrics just for fun. But then you could say wasa ka dua ka, and you're asking for a phrase. So the second one, wasaka dua ka, how do people say, and whatever the phrase is, I need water. Wasaka dua ka, where's the coffee? Wasaka dua ka. So that's when you're getting into sentence level stuff. Whereas duasak, and if you said wasa duasak and you said some sentence, most people will just answer you. But getting into some of the finer points in terms of how we're asking how to do things, this is saying how do people call it and how do people say it. Okay. So before our break, let's do some little readings, because then it's easier to break down from that. We'll come back, we'll finish up the frog story and see what other kinds of questions we might have. So I think we left off here, and who would like, let me move a couple things around. Who would like to read this one? Both sentences.
Khataya.
Sheesh.
Sewaat we shawat gana gandach nesh uagut.
Sheesh. So for the first sentence, say wa'at. I guess let's all say it. Say wa'at we shawat.
What wish what?
And what are you seeing in there? What do we got?
I see
Cold. I see cold too. The woman is cold or
Yeah.
gosh.
And so let me find where my mouse is. Okay. So we have say wa'at. And let's just make sure we know what we're doing with this. How is this different? Sa'at and say wa'at.
Well, I know when you say it's cold outside, you say kusiat.
Okay.
So that would be the top one, right? Washke?
Well, that's good. No, so now we got another one. So kusiat would be the weather is cold.
Would just be it is cold?
It would be it is cold. Okay, so sa'at, kusiat, sewa'at. So the difference here, and I think it's such a fun language. It's like it's a language that's always ready for categories. It's like, we do categories? Yes, let's do them, my favorites. So sa'at is for something to be cold, right? So there is an object pronoun there, but it probably never really changes because it's not for a person to be cold. If a person was sa'at, they're probably not alive anymore. Kusi'at, you put this on the front, which often pushes things to weather, but on its own just kind of refers to in a given space. We call it the aerial. It has you're going to see it in a whole bunch of different verbs. When you see like yakudzage, kudzati, teshachda yakushiske. Sewa'at comes from So this has k on there. But sewa'at has sa, and then there's a perfective marker. Then the classifier is 0. Technically, this is also goes like this. So there's an object pronoun right there that you can change. And then, oops, that should be like that. And then you get at. So this one is said in the perfective as well. So that's why you get sewa. So sa plus yu plus ya gets you sewa. There is a vowel shift from to a that happens kind of regularly. And you're just going to have to get used to that. It's not an every time thing. But another one is you'd say you ayatunk, they are talking. You atunk, language or a word. You watan, they spoke. So then it goes to ewa. So there are times when that's going to happen. And that's what you've got with sewa'at. So this could be chat sewa'at, is sewa'at, ye sewa'at, ha sewa'at. We can move them through that whole cycle of object pronouns. But this is for a person to be called. Okay. Xíxchʼ. What about gandach neis uwagut?
She's going in from outside.
Yes. So here you have outside, gone. Dach is from. And we're going to look at a whole bunch. We're going to really master these suffixes. De, dach, de, dach, de, dach. Towards, away from, towards, away from. And Tlingit, it does these things. Well, let me, hold on. Look at how I want to do this. I don't want to lose that. Okay. So it does these things here, where you've got two directional things in the same sentence. So gone is coming, is from the outside. You could go gone de, to outside. What is the neish part doing here? Anybody know?
Home or inside?
What's that?
Home or inside?
Yeah, so there are two different and separate. So there is a noun that is neish. That noun is home. So you could say neish de kwagut. I'm gonna go home. Ach neishi ayah. This is my house. This is my home. Neish yach yati. It's like a home. This is not that neish. And this is a directional term, which means to come inside of a building. So there's a couple of complications with neish. One is that there's a noun one, and then there's a direction one, and those are two different words. You have to use them differently. You could say neish de wu good, but if you just have neish, it needs to be uwa gut, because it means to come inside. The other complication is this is the one you would use if you are indeed inside yourself. If you are inside the building and someone comes inside the building, this is the one. That's why when someone knocks on the door, you say, Neshke, come in. That doesn't mean go home. Neshte nagu would be go home. If you need to tell someone, go home. So, just sort of keeping those things kind of straight. Nesh uwagut. It's a directional thing. But it's also, you wouldn't say, if we were standing outside, we probably technically wouldn't say Nesh uwagut. We would say hit Uwasháayí. They went into the house, and we have now situated ourselves outside of the house. There are a couple of these things that do that. We'll go over them all. I just wanted to point it out. She came in from the outside, and we are also inside. That's just directly coded into the language. Oh, the lights turned out in here. Okay, that doesn't happen very often. All right. So, to help us remember, I have a friend who, when we speak Lingít a lot, she's a Lingít teacher. She went to a conference. For whatever reason, she saw this person with a name tag, and she said, "Who's Neil?" But of course, the name tag said Neil, right? So that should help you remember Neil, right? But there are two different ones. Neil is a noun, Neil is a direction. Any questions about that?
They're both low tone.
They're both low tone. Only one of them can take a suffix, though, and that's the noun. Okay. Okay.
If you're saying you arrived at someone's house, would you use nath for that, or would you use hit?
There would be two ways you could do that. So if you say, I made it to someone's house, one is this would change to hua gut. But so then you could say it this way, or you could say, so in this case, the letter T is doing the same thing as nate. In the case of motion, it means to arrive somewhere. You could say this should be, and those have to be both noun forms. Du neechit chwagut. Du hitit chwagut. And so Lingít does this kind of stuff where there's two different ways sometimes to say the same thing, right? So if we just said, we'll stick with du hiti, just so we're not getting too confused on the nate part. But so if you said du hiti de chwagut, these are not doing the same thing. This top one says, I arrived at their house. This bottom one says, I went towards their house. So Lingít can also code in whether or not the goal was achieved. Not for every single verb, but certainly for motion verbs. And then, because you could be communicating different things. Like you say, oh yeah, they went to that house. But if it was like a long, difficult journey or something, and you might want to just say, yeah, they made it. That is later for motion verbs. Motion verbs are fun because they do stuff like that.
Sheesh.
Save that one for later. Okay, we'll do one more, then we'll take a break. Maybe two. We'll see. See how you folks are feeling. Anybody want to read these?
Xíxchʼ Uwasháayí Yées Sháatkʼ.
Sheesh. Okay, everybody. Xíxchʼ Uwasháayí. Dushatsu a uskhawu. Okay, start from the top. What do you think we got? Should we look these ones up?
Is the CH instrumental? It's referring to the wash rag?
Yeah, like do we have shoe or is this, if there's duh in the front, I'm going to say this is probably a verb. But then is there ch at the end because it's habitual? And so we're going to look up shooch and see if that verb root exists. So we'll consult the yellow book and we'll, oh, where'd it go? Okay, I was looking for flutter. So we'll go down to sh and we get she as our first set of vowels. And we're going to go to o. And there is shooch there. And once we look down, we see to give a bath. There is this L classifier thing, which I think is going to fall out of use. Maybe we could bring it back to wash feet. I don't know why it gets a classifier change, but maybe take some time and wash your feet. Think about it. Well, if we go to bathe, and we'll just go see what's there, and we get tokani, chwashuch, shatzin, ka, dushuch, and then achus, chukashuch, I'm going to bathe my feet. So the first one, tokani, is a baby. Chwashuch, I bathed the baby. Shatzin, that should be underlined. Ka, dushuch. That one should also be short. Oh no, sorry, this is ka, on. So strength on people bathe. So this gets us somewhere. Dashuch, we'll just sort of get right to it, is to take a bath. The reason why it switches over to D is because you're bathing yourself, right? So this letter D in the verb often says to do the thing to the self. Kiknach is a fun one. It means there's two ways that kiknach can be used. One of them is to be alongside something. So if two people are walking side by side, you could say they walked side by side. Kiknach can also mean to do one thing at the same time as doing the other. So this would be great for using the, rub your belly, pat your head, or whatever the thing, where you're doing two things at the same time. So you could translate it as while or at the same time as. But it really has to do with like doing two things at once. This kiknach. Kik is the side of the torso, and then nach is along. But that's how we just say doing this verb while doing this other verb. And what do we think the other verb is? For this one, we're going to look up ek, but we're also going to say if we don't find ek, we'll look up ah and see if because if you close off the ah ending of a verb, the verb root, it'll switch to ei. But we're going to look up ek first of all. E-I-K-W.
So yeah, Yanaka, that rule with EI.
If something ends with two A's, like if you have Yawaka, they say this thing. So Yawaka, they said this. If you close that, it'll switch to EI. And I'll show you that in a second, as soon as we look up this verb. So here's EI, yak, eights, ace, age, egg, egg, akaya, egg. There it is, to whistle. So we can go up here and look up whistle. Just whenever we look up, I think whenever you look up a verb, if you look it up in Lingít, just go look it up in English. So you can look at the sample sentences, read them, encode them in your brain. And eventually we're going to pull all of these sample sentences out of this dictionary and we're just going to look at them someday. Just go through, look at them all. Some of them are really fun. Some of them are a little mysterious, like they will throw you into the furnace. That's in this dictionary. So here is whistle. Kesh akha. I don't whistle. Ya akunne eku. They are going along whistling. So going back to this other thing, before we finish our last sentence on here before our break, maybe I could close some tabs, maybe, and some documents. I got a lot of them open. Let me go back to here and to here. So for example, we'll look up this verb ka, which is to say a specific thing. So we go down here to ka. And when we're talking about these suffixes on a noun, we're saying we got to pay attention to whether it's open or closed. And that's also the same for verbs. So when we see underlined K-A-A, that is an open verb root. It ends with a vowel. So if we go down, there's quite a few of these verbs. So we're looking for yawaka. So this is yeyanaka, if you're telling someone to say it. If you put su in front of it, su yeyanaka, say it again. Shish yeyakak, don't say it. Oh, maybe this isn't the best example, but it's right here. So when you put the CH on here, it changes. So now you get yeyanchakich. I always say that certain thing every time. So when you close this double A vowel, it will usually switch to an EI. So ah to A. This is important. So if you look up some verb and you say, I don't see it. I don't see kach. I didn't see that verb root. Go look up ka and see if you could, and you learn to spot, like it has a ya, and it has the zero classifier. I think I figured out which verb it is. The other one that does that is we won't do vomit because we already did diarrhea today. We'll do, but we will do mopping. We'll do mopping, which is loosely related. Okay, or we could do knowing. Let's do mopping because then let's see how we
clean up. We gotta clean up all that diarrhea.
right. So here we've got qu, the command form, qashqu, wipe it. But here we see it changes to qwe and kesh and ashqeq. So what this one does, like we'll go down here, ye ashqwech. When you close an OO verb root, it usually goes to WEI. That's why you say qoina, cheqoina, qaqoina, siqoina, shaqoina. It's wiping these different things. And you've probably seen this word before, but so to know something, you have I am getting to know it. Ya nach sa queen. And Yanasquini is called a student. There's someone who is getting to know it. But that is how you would say getting to know it, ku to queen. These are just like pattern things that happen. The vowels are important, but sometimes one vowel will shift to another. The AA to the EI is probably one of the more common ones. The OO to the WEI. You don't see it outside of verbs that much, but in the verbs you will see it. Okay, that's probably enough until break time anyways. Everybody okay? Okay. Why don't we come back at 5 till? Okay. Anybody got any questions or anything? Language stuff you're thinking about? See,
When do the two A's change? Like when something ends with like the dot and the two A's. When does that change again?
so if you have a verb, so when you have a verb and if you put something on the end of that, that's what'll trigger that change. There are, let's see. So we'll go look at another one. So basically, if a verb is open, and if it's a or u, it will change if you add a suffix most of the time. There are some times where you can add one and it won't change. But let's see, where'd my, did I close it? Hold on one second. Okay, wait a second. Here it is. Okay. So we'll go up and we'll look at like to examine. So here's a verb to examine something, to inspect, to look into. There's also a related verb which means to push your head in a direction. Like you can lift your head up, you can duck down. You would be using this same verb, but you'd say yinde in front of it instead of en da. En is noun. And this would also be like to peer, put your face through a hole or something. You would also be using this verb. So if we look, we see the command form, yanis ah. But the prohibitive, we have closed it with this, what this underlined X is really doing is saying it regularly happens. So when you say Xíxchʼ Uwasháayí Yées Sháatkʼ, which here's a situation where you could use that. Like if we're all sitting around conversing in Lingít, and I'm your nosy teacher, and you're speaking Lingít, and you notice that I'm looking at you with like, I'm giving you the teacher judgy eyes, right? I'm just kind of like, You might say, Xíxchʼ Uwasháayí Yées Sháatkʼ. And then I'll be like, oh, fine, fine. Don't judge my language, right? So you could use it like that. But so, yas it's happening right now. So this does get a repetitive suffix on the end. That suffix will push this to go to a. So these are just kind of like, so a seal or a sea lion swimming and poking its head up out of the water, you could say, atyanas ain. It's swimming along, just like that. Another one is yawagu, for a pod of killer whales was swimming along. But if it's happening right now, Yaya Nagwain. There's a song that has that in there, right? So to a, u to way. This is a little bit advanced, but just so if you start looking these up and you say, well, why did it change? It's a predictable change that does happen. And it also happens with nouns sometimes. Like, so we'll get back into this story in a second. But let me, oops, that's cool font. Okay. So for example, we have dak, and then we have eo, and then we have ut. So this you would have inland, sand, thing. I think my camera just changed for some reason. Okay. When you put these together, there are some things that happen. So dak shortens to duck. Eo shortens to ow. So in this case, it went the other direction. And then W plus A, that's going to change to AD. especially once, well, this is actually going to have the I on it. The inland sand thing is technically what that word is. And so when you add all of these together, you know, the next sort of transition is capital. But that is why we spell it with an A right there. And then this switches to an EI. These are things that do happen. We can sort of start to analyze this stuff. So when this EI contracts, a lot of times it'll switch back to the A. Here's another one that's kind of wild. So if you have te, and then you have ah, and then you have ye. So this is rock. This is a point of land or the end of a stick or something. And then this is a relational thing. When you put these together, you get this. So this one also goes through a kind of a two-step process. And of course, this happens like just really fast, right? So when you add something to the end of te, you're going to push it to go long and low. And then I'll write these as separate things. Right? So when you smush them together, this pushes it long and low. But then when Tlingit contracts things, what happens is everything except for the last thing tends to go short and low, unless it cannot go short, because it would just alter the meaning of it. So that's why ao becomes ao. That's why dak becomes dak. And te becomes te, becomes ta. It goes through these weird changes, right? So Tukayi is a rocky point or peninsula. But just these vowel switching things, they are going to happen. But they're not random. The other thing that happens a lot is if you have sa, right, it's actually se, and you have at, and you smush those things together, you get sate. So a lot of times a vowel ending plus a vowel starting with you are going to get this EI switch. Another place that you'll get it is sha is ahead, yi is below, and then at is a thing. What do you get when you put these three things together? Anybody know? Look at those rules and make a guess. What's the thing below ahead? Shayet. And so this is a little bit of an advanced sort of look at how Tlingit does smoosh together, but it does this kind of stuff on a pretty regular basis. Okay. So in our story, we're going to get back to our story, unless you got any more questions.
Xíxchʼ.
And some of this stuff, I think it goes into you can put it into the long-term memory. Be like, I don't know, I'll figure that out sometime later. I'm trying to just figure out these things. But then sometimes it's like, well, I just want you to see all the patterns that are there. It's not like you have to learn them all in order to get it. Like people will, a lot of times, figure out what you're trying to do and will meet you halfway there, right? So in our story, this is where we left off. So I'd like someone to read this sentence. We got the translation there. So we'll just check on things and see if there's something you're curious about. I'll probably point out a few things as we go along. But can I get someone to read this sentence?
Yende shach ditan ka ayachtach awashat wechich.
Gwenchish. Yendeshkau detan. Ka'ach ayachtach awashat. Xíxchʼ. Any parts you folks want to know about in there? Want to take a look at?
Hune.
Ah,
So, when she said when it's reached down and picked up along, is it because it's by the lake side? It's the ayachda.
yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, so this one, so Uwasháayí would be to grab something or to catch it.
Mm.
If you put dach in front of it, it means to grab it off of something. So you could say nadak kach Uwasháayí. They grabbed it off the table. So then you're doing like kind of two things at once, not just grabbed it, but lifted it up. So this is how you talk about lifting something up, grabbing something. And so that's why you get ayach, dach. So lake, the edge of the water at the lake, oh, the ayach, and then dach is from. Why is there an S? Why is there an SH right there?
Reflexive, but I don't.
Yeah, to the self.
know, is it, she's talking about herself?
Yeah, so kauditon is a verb. There's a related verb. Like anybody hear of this noun? Yucatan shita. Anybody heard of that? Yucatan shita. Oh, it's back to carving class for everybody. It's a bent wood, it's a crooked knife. So it's a knife that's used for carving a lot, that's got a bent edge, right? Or the knife itself is bent. So that the verb means to bend something. Yinde is downwards. Shkau detan, bent themselves. So this is the verb to like bend over. So you literally you bend yourself downward. So she bent herself downward, which just means she bent over, she leaned over. Uwasháayí Yées Sháatkʼ, and picked the frog up off the lakeshore. But again, look at word order. Downward. So this is all one sort of verb phrase. They're linked together. Yindeshkau de kan. They bent over and from the lakeshore grabbed that frog. Okay. Sheesh. How about this one? A nice long sentence. Who wants to read it?
وقت لتاق أو تلقيني ياوقا تلخ أيانا خوي تلل يكوس آن تلل آدي خيخ إقواشاية
Sheesh. A wakshatacht out liqadniye ya waqa. Tlach ayanach away tlech yakus an. Tlech ade Xíxchʼ Uwasháayí. So there's a number of things in here. Anything you want to point out, look at, ask about? Start with wakshatacht. So this, without the letter T, is the pupil of the eye. It's a pretty wild term. If you ask me, I think it's a wild term because walk is eye. So we see it get short, just like we talked about. I think shatak means it has a cavity there. It has a hole. It has a container, which is wild to me because that's very accurate. And then this is its. This verb has to do with looking at something, and it is a motion verb. So if you wanted to say, Look at me right in the eyes. Let's say, ach wak shetakt ishken. Look at me right in the eyes, right? So in this case, she looks right at the eyes of it. So that's what the T is doing. To say her looking has arrived there. Ye yawaka, she said this thing. So this is the verb we use if we're sort of quoting somebody, saying these are the words that they used. Because you could say, in akawanik, she told it to the frog. But what's important here is the words that she uses, because she violates the natural order of the universe by insulting the frog. Kach on its own, I would translate as very. Kunach, I would translate as really. And you could say kach kunach, or you could say kach, or you say kunach. Kunach in front of a verb means really verb. Kunach ichsachan, I really love you. Kach ichsachan, very much so. Kunach in front of a noun means it's a real thing. So if we had a fake frog, we could say Xíxchʼ. If we had a real frog, we could say kunach Xíxchʼ. That would work. A yanach means more than it. So when you put them together, kach a yanach, both of these things can combine to go in front of a verb, and you're really blowing it up, like so much more than it. This works as in complementary ways. You are so incredibly good. But it can also work in this case. Kesh iyakus an means you are not good looking on the face. We already had the yaukleji, to be ugly or hideous. So then she says, you are so very ugly. And then we have kesh ade is one side of the verb, it's like these bookmarks. And on the other side we have yeah. So when you have kesh ade and then a verb in the middle, yeah, you have this pattern which is cannot do it, no way it can happen. The verb goes through some changes, right? So this would be awasha in a perfective. But in this case, you get Uwasháayí. So the verb itself has to go through some pretty specific changes. But what you got here is not even a frog couldn't even marry you, is basically the literal translation. They laughed a lot when they translated this. However, full disclaimer, we are sorry to the frog people for even looking at this. Don't say this to animals. If you needed to really insult somebody in Lingít, there's probably some good material in here. Do that very carefully. But the idea with this story is they show us like things that you're not supposed to do. Then a bunch of stuff kind of comes unraveled afterwards.
Suye yanaka chade nachatnayu. I've heard it. I hear it often, but sometimes I hear it in different ways. I was wondering if maybe you could write it. The version I found in Xíxchʼ Uwasháayí is like a lot longer.
So here's one. And then we'll look at another. I guess I can make these a little big. Oops. Okay. What do you think the difference is between these ones? So the top one, and I'll say it and you guys repeat. Cha'adeyechatna'u.
Yechatna'u.
Cha'adeyechatna'u.
Fa'adeyechatna'u.
Cha'adeyechatna'u. Cha'ateye chatnayu. What do you think the difference is between these two?
Audience is plural. And the
Yes.
second one.
We'll just put it like a P in parentheses, which is plural, right? So this one is saying, forgive me, and this one is saying, you all forgive me. And this could change, right? So like here's another one where we could say, oh, I think I see the spot, it could change. Like how would that change it now? What do you think? We went from,
Forgive us.
yeah, forgive us, and then you all forgive us, right? So one is we can note whether you're saying it to one person or more than one. And then we could say, you could say, Cha'ateye hasna'u. You all forgive them. This is in a command form of the verb. It's kind of an interesting verb because it, like, cha is on its own, is sort of like just. Ade is usually towards it. Ye na'u would be to use it or to put it on. Depends on how it can mean either of those two things. So I think you could argue that this is like just use it towards me or something like that. So it's kind of a vague thing in terms of like the literal definition, but it does mean you're asking for forgiveness. Using this phrase it's really good to use this phrase, but this is not a substitute for excuse me in English. Because excuse me is a thing that we use in English to say all kinds of stuff, right? You're in my way. I'm walking past you. I burped or farted. I'm trying to get your attention. Who do you think you are? Like there's a whole bunch of ways that it could be used. I'm reaching across. I'm passing somewhere near you. But that's not how this is used. This is used like seriously asking for forgiveness. But it's a really good one to use out in the natural world. Like something goes wrong, you could say this. Like you accidentally stepped on something and like a little squirrel's house or something, and you saw that you messed it up, and you could talk to them. I don't want to use that phrase because I don't want to upset the frogs. Just even reading this stuff. Okay. Who wants to read this one? Someone who hasn't read yet? Give it a shot.
Khat
Ah,
itak kha awachich.
sheesh. Ittach ka kuch awachich. There's kind of three parts. Ittach, ka, and kuch awachich. What do those three parts do? What does ittach do? Anybody know?
Is dach a like direction?
Yeah, we just had that as a way, and it was
Oh, that's right. We had it for gandach.
follow.
Idach, I think, is next, right?
Well, yeah, so like ittach literally is from following it. But ittach, this is a really good literary device. Like you need to know how to tell stories because that's what we do a lot in languages, I think, is hey, let me tell you what happened. Hey, let me tell you what, some of it is just day-to-day stuff. Some of it is, hey, let me tell you this thing that happened to my grandfather, my grandmother. And then some of it is kind of the bigger stories. Like, let me tell you this origin story for our clan. Ittach on its own, if you start a sentence with that, it's after that. So there's these different ways to do a bit of a time jump in a story. Aqa aweh is and then, and that's just really just sort of moving on to the next thing. Iddach is tying it a little bit more, sort of like after this thing happened, this thing happened, right? So it's almost like, well, I went to the bank and then I went to the store. So it's a little bit more of sort of tying them a little bit closer together, just like wuch itch was following each other, right? So kind of like following that, or from following that literally. But in terms of how we translate it, it does a very similar thing in English in storytelling after that. What about ka?
Is it the into the lake?
Yeah, so is the lake, but then ka is onto, right? And so these are going to be, as we sort of move from the way these things work in English to the way they work in Tlingit, sometimes we're going to have a few kind of mild surprises. Like, but this is how you would, in this case, throw something onto the lake, right? Because that's when you throw it, it does hit the surface of the lake, even though it goes into the lake. So there are different things, like you could say in the shallow part of the lake, in the deep part of the lake. But in this case, the biggest thing was like throwing it back onto the lake. So sometimes in Tlingit, it's an onto, when in English it would be an into. Another example is if I had a cup and I poured water into the cup, I would also be using ka, which sometimes takes a while to kind of get used to. Which one you're going to use, it's just a different concept in Tlingit. Kuch awachich. The awachich part is to throw something, usually a living thing, and then kuch is returning. So this can be used in a lot of different ways, this kuch. It could be used to say like, was Arnold Schwarzenegger, like as the Terminator, kuch de gut, like I'll be back, right? You could say kuch de gut, I will return. So it does work as returning, like they went out in a boat and they came back. It could also, in some cases, means kind of backwards. Like let's say line culture is really interesting, like standing in a line. Because sometimes this weird thing happens to me where I don't always pay close attention. But then I'll realize someone's in front of me that wasn't in front of me before. I was like, man, you cut right in front of me. And one time I was in Tlein, Achwak shetaktawe out Tlein, we Tleinach shawat chatchewawus, which it cheke iti, chataya aka achshakat with the hun. Katiyi aya, yeo sene achkach. So one time I was in Tlein and this lady looked right in my eyes and she said, are you in line? And I said, yeah. And then she stepped right in front of me. Oh, I couldn't believe she did it. I didn't know what to do. But if someone, another thing that can happen when you're standing in a line, maybe a little bit less, hopefully, in these pandemic times, but someone will be standing like kind of right on your, just almost like breathing on you because they're so close to you. So you could turn and say, "Kuch gitahan," stand back. So this could also mean to go back from something. So you could say adach, like I could say adachnagu, get away from it. But I could say kuch gitahan, stand back from it. But in this case, she threw it back onto the lake. Awachich. Any questions about any of that?
So sorry, you said kuch di gidihan if it's like stand back from it on the front.
I heard it as just kuch gitahan or kuch gitahan. I would probably say kuch gitahan. So even though you're using the stand verb, it's saying like take a step back. Which because there is a verb for like stepping, but that's the way I heard it was kuch gitahan. Step back. It just means like stand back from, and it's not really saying from it, it's just saying, and so this is a really interesting concept for me, is kuch. Because you also have kuch de kuchen, which has something to do with the tailbone, but that means backwards. Like kuch de kuchen, kuch wa kut. I'm going to walk backwards. And so, yeah, sometimes it's returning and sometimes it's just going back. Another example, this will get us ready for thinking about direction and location. There's a song that some people sing, and it goes, Dak ji shitsu yi jin, kuch yi shitsu yi jin, dak ji shit, no. I don't sing it very often. But dak shitsak would be put your arm out. Dak. So that's going this way. Dak. Just like going out to sea. Kuch shitsak. Put it behind you. So these things are sort of related to the body as well. What's really fun in Lingít, when you get into the directions, even if you're an inland Lingít person, the way the language works is someone is situated right on the ocean looking out to sea. And I think that because dak is out to sea from the shore, and it's also straight out from your body going forward. Dak, with the underline K, is up into the interior, away from the ocean, but that would also be to bring your arm back to the body. Or if something was coming, like a little mouse or something was walking up your arm. Kuch means to return, but it also means to go behind the body. So some of these things are pretty fun because the way they relate to each other reveals a lot about the thought world, how time works, how direction works, how coming and going works. And some of the things are going to be real similar, to and from, to and from. Some of the things are going to be a little different. Don't throw frogs. Don't laugh at frogs. Don't make fun of frogs. Full disclaimer, even though we look at these stories and they're like, that she did this to the frog, but that's why they're going to come for her. Anything else? Any other thoughts, questions? We did like a real slow crawl through these things. And there's really big language in there, a lot of concepts. But I like it because it sort of shows us these larger sentences to sort of pull up. You'll start seeing kuch around, right? So you'll start seeing ka around, and you'll start seeing these other pieces as you sort of continue to interact with the language in a bunch of different ways. On Thursday, we have some folks visiting us, so we will be doing something a little different. I really like these stories. We go through them kind of slow, just because I like to sort of look at everything that's in there, and I want you to have a full digestion of the story itself, so that when you go back, read it to someone else. The other thing you can practice is if you looked at this, and if I made a version of this that only had the Lingít on there, could you then translate it line by line to someone else? Some of that will be remembering it, but other parts will be like looking at that and say, okay, there's that young girl, there's the village, and sometimes your brain will put the rest of it together. Then if I were to put together a version that only had the English, could you translate it back into the Lingít? And so we can sort of do exercises with these stories again and again and again. And we've got a version, I did a version where I read the whole thing, so you can listen to the whole thing. There's the story itself, which is pretty fun, and there's things to think about, like why did they take her, and what was it like when she came back, and the people fought the frogs, and there's a bunch of wild stuff that does go on in here. And there's some verbs that are kind of uncommon, and also some really interesting things that I think that we got from George Davis and March Dudson when they translated this story from English to Lingít. Good Xíxchʼ, everybody. We'll see you on Thursday. It'll be a little different. ask for help if you need anything with your letters. I'm looking forward to hearing them. I'm not going to give you real specific feedback. If you want that, you can send it to me and I'll send it to you separately. But I think when people they tend to either get kind of nervous or share from the heart or maybe both. So I don't think that's the place to say, you need to fix that verb. I just want to hear it because I really enjoy the parts where people become communicative in Lingít. It's really a fun time. Okay. Xíxchʼ.
Sheesh. Oh, so next Tuesday, right?
What's that?
Next Tuesday?
Yeah, it's when you're going to you're going to read your letters. We'll start and we'll just see who wants to go first. And we'll take as long as we need to give everyone a chance to read theirs.
Kete Dogden.
Mountaintop.
Sheesh.
Question Shaka Uhan.
On Thursday, bring some of your if you want to share some of your mountaintop sentences on Thursday, I think it'd be fun. We'll start with that if you haven't. What a cheese for the reminder.
You're talking about the Lingít worldview, standing on the shore and looking out to sea, and the fact that, would I be wrong in guessing that this is a pretty deep part of the language?